Good evening, Northern Colorado. This is Ron, K0AZA. I'm located in Fort Collins, and I'll be net control for tonight's NCARC TechNet. The purpose of the TechNet is to enlighten amateur radio operators on topics of a technical nature. We'll do our best to answer any technical questions for the benefit of all those who are listening. This net may be interrupted at any time for emergencies or priority traffic. If you need to use the system for an emergency during the net, say break and give your call sign. We'll acknowledge you and suspend the net until you advise that you are clear. Is there any emergency or priority traffic at this time? All licensed amateur radio operators with 70-centimeter privileges are encouraged to check into the net. NCARC club membership is encouraged, but never required for participation. Check-ins are requested for the purpose of counting participation, and no checkout is required. This is K0AZA net control for tonight's NCARC TechNet. When checking in, please give your call sign slowly, first alphabetically, then again using the ITU phonetic alphabet, along with your name and location. When checking in, please state if you have a topic that you would like to discuss. Check-ins will be taken in groups of 3. When I've acknowledged the first group of 3, I'll move on to the next group of 3. I'll start by taking check-ins from Echolink. Anyone on Echolink, please call now.
KF0 TBX Kilo Foxtrot 0 Tango Bravo X-ray via Echolink in Kansas City, Missouri.
The net acknowledges KF0 TBX and welcome to our net. Can I get your first name, please?
Sorry, first name is Tyler, KF0 TBX.
Thanks, Tyler. Glad to have you with us. Any more Echolink check-ins, please call now. Hearing none, let's go ahead and take over-the-air check-ins. Call suffixes alpha through Mike. Alpha through Mike, please call now.
This is KF0ODD, Paul from Berthoud.
This is KE0ME, Dick Loveland.
This is AE0CF Alpha Echo 0 Charlie Foxtrot Ben Fort Collins.
Let's hold up there. Hey, Dick, I missed the first part of your call sign. I know the end is ME. Could you give me the beginning of it, please?
Sure. Kilo Echo 0 Mike Echo.
Thanks. That's what I thought you said, but I wasn't sure. The net acknowledges KF0ODD, KE0ME, and AE0CF. Next group of 3, please go now.
KF0GQI, Dog and Pierce.
NGLBNK, November 0, Bravo, November Kilo, Rick in LaPorte.
This is N0EMP, November 0 Echo Mike Papa, Greg in Fort Collins, with Debbie, K0DBE, Kilo 0 Delta Bravo Echo, 2 items.
Okay, let's hold up there. The net acknowledges KF0GQI, N0BNK, N0EMP, and K0DBE. Let's go ahead and open it up to all call suffixes alpha through Zulu. Alpha through Zulu, go ahead and call now. Next group of 3, go ahead.
This is Kilo Bravo 0 Yankee Delta November KB0YBF Eric from Lake. W5VV Whiskey 5 Victor Bill in Livermore.
This is K0NMR Kilo 0 November Mike Romeo Joseph in Fort Collins.
This is N0NYY November 0 November Yankee Clark in Evans, and I am with N0 UHQ November 0 Quebec X-ray Quebec team. Good evening to the net.
Let's go ahead and hold up there. That acknowledges YDN, W5 Victor Victor, K0NMR, N0NYY, and N0QXQ. Next group of 3, call now.
This is KF0SVA, Kilo Foxtrot 0, Sierra Zulu Alpha. I'm Betty in Redstone Canyon.
Kilo Foxtrot 0, Quebec Golf Tango, John in Eaton, KF0QGT.
This is Kilo Foxtrot 0, Quebec Mike Papa, Baki in Longwood, KF0QMP.
Okay, let's hold up there. The net acknowledges KF0SVA, KF0QGT, and KF0QMP. Next group of 3, go ahead.
WA7EM Whiskey Alpha 7 Echo Mike Edenary.
Kilo Foxtrot 0, Sierra Hotel X-Ray. Actually, this is Norm first. And then also KF0SHW, Kilo Foxtrot 0, Sierra Hotel Whiskey, Mary, we're Johnstown.
Okay, the net acknowledges WA7EM, KF0SHE, and KF0SHW. Next group of 3, go now.
This is WB5TEX, Whiskey Bravo 5, Tango Echo X-Ray, Dale, Loveland, no traffic.
Okay, the net acknowledges WB5TEX. Let's go ahead and move on, and I'll come back around and take any additional check-ins here a bit later. Greg, N0EMP, you're the only one that said you had a topic, so go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Ron. First topic is this Wednesday is the Loveland Lunch. Wednesday, Perkins Restaurant on West Eisenhower, also known as Highway 34 in Loveland. And we start around 11:30. Give or take, you don't have to be a club member. It's not a club event. You do not have to be a licensed amateur radio operator. It's kind of like this TechNet with lunch. It's been described as before. Any questions on the lunch? Okay, the second topic. Occasionally we get some usually defective equipment that ends up transmitting somewhere in an amateur radio band, and it seems it's usually in the 70 centimeter band. And myself and Bart and N0NYY and one or two other people usually end up using direction finding and scouring the countryside and tracking it down. In the last 3 years, we have found 4 different devices, sources of problem. 2 of them were defective commercial sprinkler controllers that had radio wireless links to remote watering stations, and those were both old systems that were no longer in use but were still powered up and had drifted into the amateur band. Let me reset this. And one of those actually was interfering with this repeater. It was on the input to this repeater. It wouldn't key the repeater because it didn't have the 100 hertz tone, but if someone was talking, this thing would inject a bunch of noise. Other systems weren't causing us interference, but they were putting out strong signals on the amateur band, and we got them shut down. Let me reset this again. And Bart and I are currently working something that's down in Jefferson County that we first picked up here. He can hear it in Evans, and I can pick it up from my mountaintop remote location. But at any rate, we've discussed maybe building up some more people that are interested in doing this sort of direction finding and tracking things down. And it's not anything I've talked with the rest of the club board yet about. It's not necessarily going to be a club thing, although it may become that. In the meantime, I'm thinking if we put a group together, we'll start doing some practicing and stuff probably in April when the weather turns nice. But I had a few things to put out in the meantime for anyone that might be interested in this. Let me reset this. So based on what we've done in the past, we're really kind of interested in people that are licensed drivers and have a vehicle and are capable of walking a couple of miles or more on trails, because we end up seeming to do that from time to time. And again, we're mostly looking at 70 centimeter work, although there'll be 2 meter and other stuff. People that are interested in building their own antennas, that would be a plus. Anyone familiar with the cheap Yagi antennas on Kent Britton's page? If you Google WA5VJB, that's Whiskey Alpha 5, Victor Juliet Bravo, cheap Yagis, those are the sorts of things that have proven useful. I reset. Having a handheld, either a transceiver or a handheld receiver, it could even be a handheld scanner, that has a signal strength meter on it, such as a bar graph signal strength meter, is really essential. I know some of the Baofengs do not have a bar graph or any kind of S-meter display. The newer TID radios apparently do, and there's also apparently a firmware update, or a couple of hacked firmwares, experimental firmwares, that are out there that would greatly improve an S-meter reading on either a TID radio or one of the Quansheng, I think it's the K5. Ron, you may be familiar with that radio, or Bart is. One last thing. There is a book out there that should be considered as the Bible of radio direction finding, primarily for amateurs, but also for search and rescue and other, interference location and other things. The book is still in print. It's called Transmitter Hunting, Radio Direction Finding Simplified. And the main author is Joe Mowell, Mike Ocean Echo Lima Lima. I think it's on Amazon and some other publishers or distributors. Okay, any questions on all that? And 0 EMP.
YBN?
Hey, Eric.
If you can, a couple pictures put together of some of your gear and some of you using it would be a useful primer for people who haven't yet had a chance to go out on one of your expeditions.
That's a good idea, and that is something that we're going to, can put out as we get closer to springtime here. We're still refining our own gear and our own techniques. It's always a work in progress. That's why having some basic building skills and hand tools is really a plus here. My thinking is we'll do some fox hunts, but Again, more on the 70 centimeter end of it. We'll do some 2 meter stuff as well, but we'll be doing some fox hunt type of stuff, including against commercial transmitters that are operating legally in their commercial portion of the band above 450 megahertz, between 450 and 470. So in the meantime, as we get through the rest of winter, anyone that wants to build a couple of Yagis and get that transmitter book and read it and start playing around on their own with some stuff, and letting me or Bart know when April gets here, if we want to get some people together and start working on this.
Okay. Somewhere in my collection of stuff, I had grabbed a couple of attenuator pads from Hamfest. These were at one time precision attenuator pads, and now that I have equipment to test it, I can do so with a nano VNA and a tiny SA.
There's a number of unique challenges to what we're doing. A lot of the time, what we're hunting down ends up being a pretty high-power transmitter, and we do need a lot of attenuation. And as you get close, the signal gets so strong that you're just full scale on your receiver no matter where you're pointing your antenna. That's when you have to start adding attenuation. And this can be inline fixed attenuators that go in line with the coax cable, or variable attenuators, the offset attenuator like the kit that was just recently built by Rosencore. So that's definitely an aspect. Another thing we found, let me reset. The thing we're currently hunting down is a pulsed signal. It pulses about once a second, like tick, 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 tick. And because it's pulsed and it's not constantly on, trying to use a tiny SA to display the signal doesn't work well, because the tiny SA is sweeping and it misses the pulses more often than not. So every one of these is different, and every one of these cases presents unique challenges, and so having some flexibility in equipment is really important. And 0 EMP.
Understood. I just want to make sure that prior to getting a tiny SA or nano VNA, the only way I could test one of these Hamfest pickups was on blind faith, and now I have the equipment to actually check it out. KB0, YDS, back to that.
NMR, go ahead.
Joseph here in Fort Collins. I've used the tiny SA in a configuration that's readily accessible to it. It's possible to set that device for a 0 sweep width and to sit on one frequency at a time and ultimately display the signal intensity as a function of time on a log scale, which I find to be very convenient for other applications. I've never done it for direction finding, but I would think that it would commend itself for this direction finding application.
No, that's something that neither Bart or I have tested yet, and I know that the nano VNA can be set to 0 sweep, and it makes a nice CW source. I didn't know that the tiny SA, which I have one sitting across the room from me, I did not know that would could be set to 0 sweep. That would be very useful because it has, like you said, the logarithmic scale. problem we have is getting in, when we get in to within a mile or less of a source, if it's a strong signal, the equipment just gets swamped and RF leaks through cases of handheld radios, gets inside directly, and dedicated HT, receivers, communication receivers, aren't designed to handle real strong inputs to them, and they get swamped. I will look at that. Thank you, Joseph, and 0EMP.
You're very welcome. I think you'll find it quite attractive in that regard. The other part that you mentioned, I was wondering about what the shielding on these devices is vis-a-vis close in direction finding. I'm used to some laboratory equipment that is heavily shielded. And as it turns out, what I did for my Nano VNA and for my Tiny SA, I saw, I'm not sure where I saw this, but some practitioner put together a little semi-box, put a little case made of double-sided PCBs soldered together at the edges, and the purpose, the beauty of it was he put a couple of SMA connectors on the end, which were bulkhead mounted to a solid PCB, and they connected to the, let's say, less robust connectors on either the VNA or the Tiny SA. So I bought a couple of connectors from Pasternak, bulkhead SMA to SMA, and now I have a sort of a half shield. I'm going to have to test out to see what the immunity of the device is to local interference, non-conducted but radiated interference.
So most of the modern HTs have a plastic case which RF goes right through. There are some, I think there were Kenwoods that Bart has, and I'll ask him to step in here and remind me they were a VR or something or other. Were a dual band HT with a metal case and a bar graph signal strength display. The other thing we do is take the antenna completely off of an HT, hold it close to the body, like in front of your chest, and use your body itself to block signal. It's called body fade, and that's a technique when you get close and you have a strong signal to tell what direction it's coming from. Is turn your back to it and your body blocks the signal, and you can see a dip in the signal strength. Bart, what was the metal cased HTs you had?
Those would be the Yaesu VX5. Very, very handy little radios. Very small, a little heavy because of the aluminum case, but that also lends itself to excellent shielding and zero in my way.
Are those still in production? And if you're not, do you know how available they are on the used market?
They are not in production any longer. They've been replaced by the VX7, which has a plastic front panel on it. There are hundreds of them out there for sale all over eBay. I think I have 3 of them by accident, one on purpose, but these things happen. Anyway, there are lots of them out there available. The numbers do tend to wear off the keypad. The power switch tends to stop working, but a good cleaning with alcohol will usually take care of the power switch. And zero in my way.
And those are dual band, correct?
Many bands, they'll receive just about anywhere you send them, but they transmit on 2 meters and 440, yes. And 6 meters, sorry, tri-band.
Excellent, thank you. And 0EMP.
TEX.
Sounded like there was a double there, but TEX 1. Go ahead, Dale.
WB5TEX. The Yaesu VX6 is a tri-band 2-meter 224/40 metal case as another option, and I bought one last year, so I guess they're still in production as maybe another option.
Thank you. Back to you, Ron, for any more questions from anyone.
Thanks, Greg. And since we haven't said it in a while, this is K0AZA Net Control for tonight's NCARC TechNet. Are there any other questions for Greg or comments on this topic? Okay, something I can add to it. The TID Radio TDH3 does have, as Greg mentioned, some custom firmware that has been developed for it. The one I've been keeping an eye on is made by a guy with a call sign NICFW, November, India, Charlie, Foxtrot, Whiskey. They have a Facebook page. It's TID Radio TD-H3 Hacking. Again, TID Radio, TD like Tango Delta dash Hotel, the number 3 Hacking, if you look that up on Facebook. Or if you just do a search for NICFW TDH3 firmware on Google, you can come up with their web page. Let me do a reset here. I haven't installed the custom firmware, partly because I haven't seen a real need for it. I'm not too offended by the stock firmware. But my understanding is it doesn't break anything. You can put the original firmware back in if you don't like it, and it does do things like it adds a really nice signal meter to it. So if you have a TDH3 and are interested, you might want to look up that software. Any questions on that? You okay? Before we move on, are there any late check-ins? Any late check-ins, please call now.
Whiskey 0 Kilo Juliet Mike W0 KJM Kyle Fort Collins late check-in.
Whiskey Niner Bravo Papa Zulu. Whiskey Niner Bravo Papa Zulu Don Fort Collins.
W1BAN Ivan Fort Collins.
Okay, the net acknowledges the W3 sum, W0 KJM, W9 BPZ, and W1 VAN. Are there any other topics, questions, or discussion tonight?
KJM.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bart and Greg, if you guys could attach me to that email chain or whatever it is you guys have going on for that RDFing, let me know. I would love to attend and help you out in any way that I can.
Yeah, most definitely. I don't know what time you started listening. Did you catch the whole thing on the concept of kind of expanding the cadre of DF hunters?
A firm. I heard everything since the beginning. I was just sandbagging and didn't check in early.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely add you in there. And again, we're probably thinking about April before we start doing any outdoor stuff. But again, anyone that gets that book would be a big help ahead of time. One other comment was on Kent Britton's cheap Yagi antennas. He has several different ones, including some very long, like 10-element, 12-element ones for 70 centimeters. The one that's really good for direction finding is one he designed for satellite work, and it is 6 elements, and it's cut for 435 megahertz as designed. And once we get together, we'll talk about scaling Yagis by size, changing them to a different design frequency just by figuring out a scaling factor. But that 435 megahertz 6-element antenna I actually got a hold of him, and he recommended that one for direction finding because it has a very clean pattern and it's not terribly awkward to handle. So that's what I'm using right now, and I've been very happy with it. If you decide to build one, that might be the one to build. N0EMP.
Hey, Greg, could you give me the name of that book again, please? I was busy scribbling call signs and things when you said it earlier.
Yes, it is Transmitter Hunting, Radio Direction Finding Simplified. There's two authors. The primary author is Joseph Moel, Mike Ocean Echo Lima Lima, call sign Kilo Zero Oscar Victor. And I'll check here in a minute, but I do believe it is still, I think Bart looked last week, still available on Amazon, and it was available somewhere else that Bart looked. Can you confirm that, Bart?
Roger, Roger. Second author is Thomas Curley, Whiskey Bravo 6 Uniform Zulu Zulu. Not that that helps too much, but Amazon has it new for $30. Abe Books, Alpha Bravo Echo Books, has it for $14. Rift Books has it for $29.94. Alibri, ALIBRIS, has it used for $11.94. It's all over the place. Here's a used one at Walmart for $14. That's Walmart online, of course, but look at the title exactly as Greg gave it. They're everywhere, and I can't recommend it enough. In addition to radio direction finding, it's full of helpful ham radio stuff. There's a bunch of great stories in there, but mostly it's hardware, how to use it, why it works, what it does, all that sort of stuff. I love this book. N0 is my one.
This thing, my copy, was originally published in 1987. I don't know if there's a second edition yet. I don't think there is. I think it's the original first edition that's still in print. That's a long time for a book to be in print. N0EMP.
NMR again.
NMR, go ahead, Joseph.
I thank you. Greg and Bart, I'm curious, what is the initial observation that tips you off that there's a quest out there to chase? What's going on out there that you see, and how do you find out about these? Curious.
I'll throw in my input on that. Let me make sure I have this. The short answer is 3 letters long, SDR, Software Defined Radio. Being able to look at a whole spectrum at once and go, oh, what's this thing? And then listening to it and go, well, that's not a valid amateur radio transmission. That's how I found the thing that we're looking for way down in Morrison right now. From some property that I've got a remote receiver on up northwest of Fort Collins at 7,500 feet. But the one that was directly interfering with this repeater started off as hearing interference on the repeater, and then looking, that triggered that search. Then looking for the interfering, is there something on frequency, or is it something on site that's 10 feet away from the repeater? And that turned out to be something in South Loveland. But yeah, it can either be an observation that there's interference, or it can just be, let's look at the bands and see if something new popped up that didn't used to be there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the SDR observations. I have a one running fairly continuously, and I use it to study the bands and trying to deepen my knowledge of the ham bands, the amateur bands, and others, and see what's going on there. There's an interesting amount of traffic of widely different kinds on the bands.
The other thing that I do, let me make sure I have this. Most of you know that our repeaters, in addition to our repeaters requiring a CTCSS tone to get into the repeater, they also transmit a CTCSS tone that's 100 hertz. And any modern mobile or handheld radio, you can set the tone squelch so that your receiver on your end requires that tone so that you do not hear random obnoxious noise unless it's me talking on the repeater. That can't be helped. But I leave that off on my radios, especially my mobile radio. I don't enable that because I want to hear something that's on our frequency that shouldn't be there. So that's another way that we have stumbled across things. I don't know if Bart has anything at all to add on that question. And Zero EMP.
Absolutely. I also don't use tone for receive, and my primary reason for doing that is oftentimes a new ham will put a frequency in that matches the repeater, and they will talk there, not realizing that they have to have an offset. If they don't know they have to have an offset, they probably don't know they have to have a tone. And if they happen to be close enough to you, you can hear them on the output, and you can notice that there's no beep, no courtesy beep when they unkey. At that point, you can address them and say, I believe you're transmitting on the output of the repeater. You need to have an offset. You need to have a tone, assuming they're licensed. Yeah, of course. Also, fox hunting is a tremendously social event. You'd be amazed how many people want to know, what is that thing you're carrying? Usually it's a Yagi antenna on a pole or in your hand, and a receiver, as Greg mentioned. And lots of people stop and ask questions and want to know. There are also cases of emergency personnel, such as police or fire, becoming aware that something unusual is happening on their frequencies, and some of them know ham operators, some of them are ham operators, and there are numerous stories out there of law enforcement personnel or emergency personnel contacting hams to help them find out exactly what's going on, whether it's someone that's trying to get their attention because they need help, or whether it's someone doing illegal things that are interfering. They know to find a ham club and ask around. And that's another one of the reasons we would really like to have more people doing this. Plus, it's a lot of fun. And Zero NYY.
Acknowledged and thanks. All good reasons, and as you say, very social. Perhaps if I didn't have to go hiking, which I don't enjoy, I'd be front and center to participate. NMR.
Well, that's not a hard and fast rule. I'm just based on what we end up usually having to do. But there's initially a lot of driving to different locations, stepping out of the vehicle and waving an antenna around, taking some notes, getting back in the vehicle, driving to some other location, getting out and standing there. So the hiking bit, we can cover that, and we have other people that can cover that. This also brings up a good point. I know there's some people in here tonight on the net from Berthoud and Longmont. Having more people out outside of the Fort Collins, Loveland area would be very helpful. One of these things was only 2 miles from my house. One of them was in South Loveland, which wasn't too far. The next one ended up being down in the town of Erie, but unfortunately it was bouncing off Long's Peak, so I ended up going all the way up to Nederland first before getting on the right track. And now we're down in Jefferson County, so having some people that are interested that are further out would also be very helpful. But yeah, we can find people that'll hike Joseph N0EMP.
It also seems like a little bit of GPS positioning, map handling, and triangulating would seem to be an important part of this craft, right?
It does, and also terrain analysis. Our topography around here is both a blessing and a curse as far as radio direction finding goes. It's a blessing, for instance, with the Jefferson County signal. After some false leads, I just ended up driving south on I-25 with my mobile radio with an omnidirectional whip. And every time I was going up a hill that was north-facing, the signal dropped. Every time I crested, came down, facing south, it came up. And it kept doing that all the way down to Denver, or all the way down to Thornton anyway. So just that narrowed it down substantially before I even had to use a directional antenna. We got on some false tracks early on around Platteville, but we sorted that out. The downside of the terrain around here is, especially on 70 centimeters, that really reflects very well, and you end up chasing reflections. And reading a map and reading the terrain, reading topography, really helps to isolate what you're seeing and hearing. Is it a direct signal, or is it probably a reflection? N0EMP.
Well, clearly there's a lot of skill building going on here. It's not something that you just could do right out of the chute. Got to build up some tools and some knowledge and some feel for it. NMR.
Why?
Go ahead, Bart.
Joseph, I would say yes and no. There's definitely skill building going on, but you can also dive in with an HT and what do you spend for a tape measure beam, $8 or $10? You can do this with no beam. Greg already mentioned the body shielding aspect of that. There are numerous very small, very cheap devices that can be had. There are numerous insanely expensive devices too that take that enhance the use of the physics surrounding the art. But yeah, the first time I went, I had a handheld and a duck, and I found out you can separate the duck antenna off of the radio by a little bit. That was a BNC, so it was easier than an SMA, but you can separate the antenna, you can knock the signal down that way. There's a whole lot of different things you can do, and but a tremendous amount of education available in the physics of radio propagation, the reflections, the knife edge, antenna design and building, characterizing your antennas. And I will say the Tiny SA and the Nano VNA are revolutionary devices for being able to pattern an antenna. There's a lot of fun to be had here. N0 and Y. Back to net.
EMP.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, and something Joseph mentioned there is part of why we wanted to kind of do these classes or kind of build a little bit of a team or something is he mentioned a lot of skill building has gone on, and it has with Bart and I and a couple other people have done this for years. Before I was a licensed ham, I used to direction find weird signals just to identify what they were. I would track them down to the source to identify what is this thing I'm hearing on the radio. And I want to pass some of that knowledge on and say, hey, here's what I've learned in doing this, for 40 years off and on as a kind of a hobby, from, among other things. So that's part of the motivation here. And 0EMP.
This is K0AZA, net control for tonight's NCARC TechNet. Any other comments or discussion on this topic or any other topics for the net tonight?
And we like to share. And when I said a lot of skill building going on earlier, I certainly did not mean that as a barrier to entry, but as one of the benefits of playing the game, having the fun going out there and learning how to do things better. NMR.
Joseph, I apologize. I think I doubled with you, but I believe we got the gist of what you were saying. Any other questions or comments on this topic or any other topics for the net tonight?
This is KE0BZY in Denver. Sorry for the late check-in. Can I throw something in?
Yeah, KF0BZY, welcome to the net, and absolutely. Would you mind, before you did that, giving me your first name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Quinn.
All right, Quinn, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I kind of picked up on the conversation well into it, but I just wanted to thank you guys for doing that, because I know it's a fun hobby and everything, but there are definitely signals out there that don't belong where they are, and it's really nice for someone to be actually trying to resolve it. I wanted to mention about how do you know this occurs, and I'll just tell you my low tech way of looking at it. Both me and my brother picked up on at least one signal that doesn't belong. Let me break for a sec. If you take just your cheap handheld radio and flip over to VFO mode and either just dial the frequency up or down or set it on scan and have it run up and down the ham 70 centimeter area, you hit all sorts of stuff, digital signals and stuff that's a long ways away and so forth and so on. Repeater groups that you never had any idea were there, and there's lots of those. But you'll hit things that are not ham radio, and they're not really digital, and it sounds like it might be digital, but some kind of old, outdated telemetry probably. One that I've come to a lot is on 447-700, right on top of 447-700. And so just with a walkie-talkie, you can hear things and it's like, oh, that doesn't belong here, even without a software-defined radio set up. So just to throw in, thanks, and you can find these things just simple with your radio on VFO mode.
Thank you for that. Any questions or additional comments on that?
Yeah, one comment on that, N0EMP.
Go ahead, Greg. Yeah,
one of the things I learned early on after wasting my own time, I I thought I found something that didn't belong, and I was going to go track it down. And I built an antenna just for that frequency, and went out and drove a few blocks away and couldn't hear it. It was coming from my own house. So when you find something that you think doesn't belong, check it on a different receiver, because it might just be a birdie in the receiver. Disconnect your antenna and see if you still hear it. And then especially if you have an HT, just go take a walk around the block and see if it goes away once you get one or two houses away. It might be very local to your location. So before you waste a lot of time or report it and try to rally the troops, let's make sure it's not extremely local to your location. And 0 EMP.
BZY again. Well, yeah, absolutely, you betcha. The thing that is particularly notable about that particular example is I could hear it in Denver, and my brother could hear it in Fort Collins, and so and I could hear it with different radios, and so it wasn't some kind of EMI from the radio, or it was clearly a signal, but that was out there and was strong as heck. But yeah, good cautions. And I'm not saying any of that tells you anything about direction finding. I'm just saying you can hear it. Direction finding's the whole different story.
Yeah, thanks for that. Anybody else? Hearing nothing, this concludes the NCARC TechNet. Net Control would like to thank each station for their participation. We had a total of 24 check-ins tonight. This net will occur again next Monday at the same time on this repeater. This is K0AZA, closing the net at 1903 and returning the repeater to normal operation. 73, and good night, everyone.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.